There's a brutal truth that most business owners refuse to face, and that is that you are the biggest bottleneck in your own company. Now, trust me, I didn't want to hear this either, so I'm in the same camp as you when I figured this out years and years and years ago. Well, first off, I'm Craig Emsley, and after leading and building an 8-figure sales team and working with sales professionals from all walks of life, I've seen this exact pattern destroy more businesses than any external competitor ever could. Now, hear me out. You started your company because you're great at what you do. You can sell your service or product better than anybody else. You know the product or your service inside and out, and you have the relationships, the credibility, and most importantly, the passion. And that's exactly why you are stuck. And what I'm about to show you is exactly why being the irreplaceable founder is actually the fastest way to kill your growth and the counterintuitive steps you need to take to break free from this trap. Now, let me describe you your typical day, and you tell me if this sounds familiar in the comments down below. First of all, you wake up, you check your calendar and see back-to-back sales calls on your calendar. And between calls, you're putting out fires in operations, reviewing marketing campaigns, and answering your team's questions. And somehow you're still trying to find time to actually run the business. And you might finish your day around, or your last call at 7, 8 p.m. like I once did, exhausted, but knowing you closed a few deals, but that tomorrow actually looks the exact same. And you've got a waiting list of prospects, but you cannot scale because you're the only one who can sell at that level in your business, and specifically at that level because your business needs that level of attention. Does that sound familiar? Well, this is what's going to bring us right into what I like to call the founder's sales trap. Now, here's exactly what's happening. Every business has what I called founder syndrome in their sales process. And as the founder, you have inherent advantages that no salespersons can replicate. And to elaborate on that a little bit more, let's delve into the iPad here and look at some stuff I actually wrote down in terms of the founder sales trap. Now, the first one we gotta have to talk about over here is actually the built-in credibility, okay? So this is where you are the company. Okay, and this is a lot, and we're going to go through this video, but a lot of this is mainly just a mindset that you have. And trust me, I completely understand, because I have been there over and over and over again, especially when you're in kind of startup phase or kind of in that small business phase. And again, I know the US specifically classifies all businesses under $40 million a year as small businesses. In my mind, a small business is anything under $12 million a year, and there's no data backing that. That's just kind of in my mind. Now, again, the first founder sales trap is that built-in credibility, right? Where you think you are the entire company. Now, the second part to this is the unlimited authority, right? So this is the part where you can make any decisions on the exact spot and move the company forward, okay? Now, the third part is the passionate expertise, right? So this is where you know every detail and truly believe in the solution to move the company forward, right? And I'll explain all of this in a little bit here, and it will make a little bit more sense. Now, the fourth part to the founder sales trap is the actual relationship leverage, right? And this is where prospects want to deal with the person in charge. And this is so hard when you're specifically creating content, right? And you know specifically, if you've watched this channel a long enough time, I have put out a lot of content on creating content, because that is going to get people to like you and know you in the sales process, which is going to make the sales process way easier on you and your sales team. Now, specifically, this becomes a problem when you are the face of the business, and you will come to find that people want to talk with you only all the time. And I'm going to give you a solution to this later on in this video if you stick with me here. Now, the fifth and final part to the actual founder sales trap is the flexible approach, okay? Now, this is where you can adapt your pitch in real time based on the conversation. Now, again, these are all the advantages of the founder's trap, right? And this is why it's making you an incredible closer, okay? But here's the thing, they also make you impossible to replace. Or so you think. Now, let's look at the hidden cost of being irreplaceable, right? So while you're busy being the best salesperson in your company, here's what's happening behind the scenes. And let's kind of zoom into this so we can expand on this specifically here. Now, the first problem you're gonna run into is the growth ceiling phase, okay? Your revenue is gonna be capped by your personal capacity, right? If you're the salesperson, the only salesperson in your business taking all the calls, well, what happens, when you want to take a vacation, or your wife or husband, one has a medical emergency and you have to go take care of that for a couple of days, right? Or there's so many other examples I can bring up here, but I don't want to bore you to death. But you get the point that I'm trying to hammer down here. If you stop with trading your time for money, right? Meaning if you are the only salesperson in your business and you have to step aside for any what reason, your revenue stops. That is a huge red flag in your business, and this is something that you need to resolve ASAP. Now, the second part to this is the opportunity cost, right? Now, this is specifically where every hour you spend selling, right, is an hour not spent on strategy, partnerships, or higher level business development, right? So again, when you are spending so much time in the weeds, busy selling people, right, on your product or service, other parts of your business is going to slack, okay? Now, the other part to this is the business dependency, okay? Now, again, you do not want to be in this stage where your company cannot operate without you, right? And then if you are potentially looking for an exit, right, this is making your company basically worthless to potential buyers. Why? Because your business cannot run without you, which is a big red flag for potential buyers if you are wanting to sell your company, right? A lot of people watching this, are gearing up for an exit, and most people watching this probably just want to have a cash flow company, right? It doesn't matter, and it's up to you. It's not, one business is better than the other. This is just some of the disadvantages of you being in the founders or in that founder-centric trap, right? Now, again, the next part to this is the team stagnation, right? So this is specifically where your best people will leave your organization because there's no growth path when you do everything important or take all the important tasks for yourself, right? This is, I cannot explain to you, when you hire top talent, you need to be able to provide them with a platform to grow and make as much money as possible, right? Now, moving into the fifth part here, which is a burnout is inevitable, okay? So if you are, taking all the sales calls yourself, putting out fires, answering your team, running the ops, running the marketing team, you are literally, all you have is a high paying job and not a business specifically, okay? Now let's, run over some math that might actually shock you. And in order to do that, let's just move over here to the right on the iPad specifically and run through some math, right? So let's just say, for an example, you're doing around 50K a month in revenue, right? And you're personally closing around 80% of those deals, okay? And in order to do that, let's just say, for hypothetical sake here, that you're working 60 hours a week just to maintain that 50K per month, okay? But what I'm asking you is, what if those 60 hours a week was spent on strategy, partnerships, or building better systems, or working with your marketing team? Now, let me ask you this. What if you could 3x your lead generation side of the business because you had time to focus on marketing alone in addition to everything else that's going on, right? And what if you could develop a new service line or expand into new markets, right? Now, this can only be done if you have the time to focus on all of these things. And if you're stuck in sales all the time, you're not going to have time to actually think about how to scale and grow the actual business. And the opportunity cost of your time in sales literally could be costing you a lot of money in growth, okay? Now, let's look at the framework here specifically that I have down here. And, the solution here isn't just to hire a salesperson and hope for the best, right? That is literally what most founders try, and it fails spectacularly. And I see this all the time, right? Because here at Sales Match, we go out and recruit, vet, and put the sales reps through the paces so that they are ready to be placed within our clients' businesses, right? And I speak to a lot of founders all the time, and specifically around this specific part of recruiting and hiring sales reps, they just kind of rely on their gut when this fails them miserably. Okay, now I'm gonna give you the exact framework I use to help founders remove themselves from sales without destroying their close rates. And this is what I specifically call the scale method. Okay, so let's just have this right here, and let us actually go into this specifically, where I'm going to be talking about the actual scale method. So let me just write this down, and we can see here, this is the actual scale method. Okay, so the first part, the S to the scale method, is systematize for the founder advantages that we talked about, okay? Now, the second part to this is creating transferable authority, and the third part, the A, is automate credible building, okay? And the L part is leverage content for expertise, and then we have the E, which is establish compensation alignment. And I'm gonna go through all of this letter by letter. So let me break down each one of these for you specifically. Now let's start over here with the S part, right? Which is systematize the founder advantages. Okay, now in this specific section, the first step is documenting everything that makes you effective so it can be replicated, okay? Now, this is gonna be your unique advantages audit specifically. Now, things that, I'll ask you a couple questions here that might stimulate some things, because, as a founder, you're sometimes doing so many things that when you actually sit down and think about what you're actually doing and how to get yourself out the weeds, it's so hard to systematize that. So I'm going to provide you with a couple of questions that I can think of here to start thinking, or to help you start thinking about the things you do on a daily basis and how to remove you from that. So specifically think about, what specific phrases do you use that prospects actually respond well to? Or, what stories do you tell that builds trust really quickly? Or maybe how do you handle the top 5 objections differently than a script specifically would? Right? And, and specifically this is in the sales process, right? So let's concentrate on the founder advantages in the sales process. That's what we're doing here, okay? Now, also think about this. What questions do you ask your prospects that other sales reps would never basically ask or would never expect, right? And then another question is, how do you transition from problem identification to solution presentation, right? And most founders think this stuff, cannot be taught, but that's because they've never actually properly documented their process, okay? And this is so important. And this leads me into, the discovery process for documentation, okay? Now, what are some actionable steps that you can take to actually get this down? And in this day and age with AI, it is so super easy, right? Now, the first step you're gonna do is record 20 of your best calls. And if you recorded all of your calls, right, go in and think to yourself, okay, which of these clients, or the easiest way is to look at your client list, right? And then go back to the call recordings and use those call recordings to identify the exact moment those prospects bought into your solution, okay? And then what you're gonna do is actually map out the questions that led to that exact moment and create decision trees for different prospect types, okay? And then finally, you're just gonna document your objection handling approach for each common pushback, right? And this might sound complicated, but guys, the easiest way to do this is just take those 20 calls, right? Take the transcripts of those calls, plug it into GPT, and ask GPT all these questions, and it's gonna kick it out for you, okay? Now, this isn't about creating rigid scripts, okay? It's about giving others the frameworks that make you successful. Because again, guys, I believe wholeheartedly that if you have an experienced closer, they should not be working off scripts, okay? You should be giving them exactly what I'm just telling you here, the best call recordings, right? The best questions to ask, right? The most frequently asked questions by your prospects, and they should just run with it, right? Because again, if you are hiring a great salesperson, right, they are not going to be working off of a script. I promise you that. They're going to be working off the framework or the messaging that needs to go across, right? And the future state that they need to get the prospects in order for them to buy, which is in an emotional state. And really good salespeople know this and they breathe by it. Okay, now let's move on to the second part here. So that is systematize the founder advantages. Let's move on to creating transferable authority. Okay, now here's the thing you have to realize. Your salespeople will never have your founder authority, okay? However, you can create systems that transfer enough authority to be effective, okay? And let me basically elaborate here on the authority transfer mechanisms that I have used, okay? Now, the first one you can concentrate on here is escalation protocols, okay? So have clear guidelines on when closers can involve you for specific decisions, okay? So for an example, I've had a closer before years and years and years ago, and in his system, in his sales process, he involved me in every single call I had to come in for the close. This was about 5 years ago. And this became a problem because he could not close deals without me being on the call itself, right? And obviously, clearly, this is a huge, huge problem because every time we had to close a deal, I had to step in and close the deal. So what we had to do there is basically limit him and say, hey, you can call me in 5 calls a month. I can come in and get the close done, right? So the reason I'm saying this is that you need to be hyper clear on the guidelines, right? That is allowed and not allowed, where closers can involve you and take time out of your day, okay? Now, the next thing I want to talk about is approval limits, okay? Now, you need to give your closers authority to make certain decisions or offers without checking in with you. Super important. You need to give them the power to do so, okay? Now, the next part is the founder bridge technique, right? Now, instead of handing, off prospects to cold closers, right? Create a warm transfer process. And the easiest way to do this is just record a brief selfie video introducing your closer and basically, hyping them up, explaining their experience maybe, why they're a great closer, why they're going to take care of them, right? And specifically, you need to personally introduce your closer as a specialized partner, for their specific situation, okay? Now, again, what you're doing here is you are setting the expectations that this person has your full authority to make decisions, right? And you physically pass the conversation to your closer while you're either you can do this on the call specifically, right? When you hop on the first 5 minutes, although I don't recommend this because as you scale, that becomes very harder. So the easiest way to do this and transfer the authority is by a selfie video introducing your actual, your prospect. And an even better way to do this is if you record every selfie video for every prospect that they talk to, and it can be a simple, 30-second clip, right? Although again, at scale, this becomes harder and you need to start creating generic clips that works, for the warm handoff. Now, let's move on to the next part here, which is automate your credibility building, okay? Now, your personal credibility needs to be built before the sales call even happens, okay? So let's look at some pre-call, let's call it the pre-call credibility sequence, okay? Number one, you need to have some case studies featuring your personal involvement in client success, okay? Another thing that you should have is video testimonials mentioning you by name. Okay, and then also content that demonstrate your expertise and social proof from industry leaders who know you personally. All of this is going to build that trust prior to the call, and you need to deliver these resources and have your prospects consume this prior to them hopping on the call. And you can do so through email sequences, or if you have a great marketing team, what you should be doing is kind of like a marketing campaign where once they book a call, they get absolutely, bombarded with your content, right? And you can have this done too, but again, I'm not going to touch on that here. We're specifically going to focus on the scale strategy. I'll make another video regarding that. Now, again, the trust transfer system, this is where you basically create content that builds your credibility, then have your sales team reference this content during calls specifically. Like this video I'm creating here specifically. My sales team will always reference, the YouTube channel of Sales Match. Why? Because they can see our expertise. They can see me talking. They can see, the founder talk directly and see where the expertise of the company is coming from. So instead of them having them build credibility from scratch, this is my specific sales team, they're basically leveraging the credibility that I've already established through making these videos specifically. Okay, so that's how you automate credibility building. Okay, now let's move on to the L part here, which is leverage content for expertise. Okay. Now this is where your deep product knowledge or service knowledge and passion are or is an advantage, okay? But again, they can be systematized through content, okay? And how do you do this? Well, first off, create video explanations of your most complex solutions to problems that you have, right? And you can even create a case study, or have case studies, breakdowns showing your problem-solving approach to the problems that your ideal customers are having, right? Exactly like I create these videos. It's around the problems that my ideal customer is having, right? And then maybe you can also have frequently asked questions videos addressing the questions that only you usually handle as a founder. And then finally, you need to process explanations for how your service actually works, okay? Now, this is let's call it the founder content library, right? Now, this is where you're actually going to go out and build a library of content that your closers can reference or share during calls, okay? And when a prospect has, complex questions, instead of the closer fumbling through an explanation, they can actually share a video of you directly explaining that specific problem perfectly, okay? And, we specifically had this, when, for my closers specifically, we call this the request, right? So they can submit requests on a daily basis where I film personalized videos for my prospects, right? So that my prospects understand that I'm involved in the process as well, because this whole company is founder-led specifically, right? And I keep a tight grip on which closers, setters, or CSMs we place within companies, right? Now, it's so important, okay, that you have that credibility and deliver that credibility as well off to your prospects. Now, the last part I want to focus on here is establish compensation alignment, okay? Now, here's the thing. If your closer isn't making a significant amount of money, they'll never be motivated enough to replace your founder energy, okay? And here is the psychological, here's some tips for you, okay? So if you believe, I talk to founders all the time, there's no right way and wrong way here in terms of commission only, salary only, or a hybrid model. What I believe is that closers and setters should never be on just salary, okay? A hybrid model is fine, and if you're going to do a hybrid model, then the base salary should just cover their needs, okay? And the commission should be where they can build wealth, okay? And in addition to that, you should be creating accelerators that reward high performance exponentially and offer maybe equity or profit sharing for exceptional performers, okay? And you're gonna have to build in retention bonuses for long-term commitment so you do not have that churn, the constant churn. Because what better way to keep somebody within your company if there's a big pot of gold waiting for them at the end of the year, right? Now, here is the OTE reality check, or the on-track earnings reality check, right? Your closer's OTE should be high enough to attract someone who could run their own business but choose to work for you instead, okay? I'll say that again. Your closer's on-track earnings should be high enough so that they can actually have the ability to go build their own business, but they choose to work for you instead. Okay, now you're probably sitting there and thinking, okay, this is all great information, Craig, but how do I implement all of this? And here's what I'm going to provide you with. Here's the exact implementation roadmap that you can follow in the next 90 days to get all of this done. So let's break this down into, let's just say phase 1, right? Let's just write this down here. Phase 1 is going to be weeks 1 through 4. Okay, now this is where you're going to record all of your sales calls for 1 month. Okay, you're going to document your top 10 most effective phrases or questions, and you're going to create your authority transfer mechanisms and build your credibility content library like we talked about, and define compensation structure for your future closer. Very, very, very important, right? And we've covered most of this as well, so this is just your actionable steps. Now, phase 2 specifically, and this is going to be in, maybe weeks 4 to probably weeks, let's just say 5 to 8 specifically. That's a good time frame over there. So in phase 2, where specifically you're going to be talking through, or going through week 5 through 8, this is where you're going to create, prospect introduction videos, and you're going to build that pre-call credibility sequences that we talked about, right? And this is where you're going to test your founder bridge technique with a few prospects, okay? And this is that's week 5 to 8. So phase 3 specifically is going to be weeks 9 to 12 specifically. So it's 4-week gaps, right? Now, this is where you're going to source candidates with expertise in your industry that have sold at your price point before. You're going to interview them and vet them using role play scenarios, and you're going to document your process, okay? Now, this is so freaking important, and I cannot describe how important the vetting process is when finding new closers and setters, right? I've created several videos on this that there's data out there that shows that most people lie on their resumes, right? Number 2, they're going to put their best foot forward in the interview process, right? They're going to sound their best, they're going to look their best, they're going to act their best. However, think about it like this. When you go on a first date with, a guy or girl, and, they're not going to tell you that, they're not necessarily going to tell you their worst qualities, right? They're going to put their best foot forward. The same thing is happening during an interview process. And this is not just for salespeople. This is for all people, right? Or all staffing solutions, right? Now, again, you have to put them to the rigor through the vetting process, and a really stringent vetting process, in order to ensure that they are, at the level that they say they are, and they can produce real results, and they don't just, work their way through the interview process and they come out above, right? You need to make sure that you hire the right people, okay? Now, here's the 30 to 60 to 90 day performance plan. The first 30 days that we talked about here specifically, right? Where this is where your closer should shadow all your calls. They should watch every single one of your calls, okay? And then they should practice using your documented frameworks, okay? Day 30 to 60, which is more or less in this phase here, they should run their call solo with also your introduction or your transfer of, what's the word I'm looking for here? Basically the videos, the selfie videos that we talked about, where you transfer your credibility over to your closer, right? And then you are actually going to review call recordings and provide coaching for all of the calls that they have, right? And specifically in the first couple of weeks, review every single call, okay? And this is actually where they're going to use that content library that we talked about, okay? And what can you expect here? Because please remember, a new closer is not going to close at your level, okay? But by day 60, right, they should be more or less at 70% of your normal close rate, okay? So do the math on that specifically. Now, in the third phase here, days 61 to like 90, this is where they need to operate independently, and you can do weekly check-ins, okay? And they are going to contribute to improving your documented systems. So they're going to document over document the documents that you've provided them. They're going to go through that and change things, right, and make it their own. And this is the goal here, is that they should be from 80 to 90% of your normal close rate, okay? Now, here are some things. I can already hear a lot of you saying, Craig, prospects want to talk to the founder only, okay? And I hear you. Some do initially, but what they really want is to talk to somebody with authority that can solve their problem. And if you transfer that authority effectively and your closer is, competent, the objection disappears really quickly. Okay. Now, what about, if you're sitting there and thinking, well, my sales process is too complex and, too systematized. Okay. I'm sorry to say, but this is just an excuse. If you can do it repeatedly, it can be systematized, okay? The problem is you've never taken the time to document exactly what you do versus what you think you do, okay? And here's one that I get all the time. Good salespeople are too expensive. Okay, my question is, compared to what? Right? The opportunity cost of you doing sales forever, right? Now, how expensive is that time? Because if you think about it logically, right? If you have if you're doing all the sales yourself, right? And let's just say that sales position you're making 150 or 200K a year. How much more money can you get, right? If you put in a closer, yes, you're getting rid of that 150K to 200K a year that should have come to you given to a closer. Okay, but how many more calls can they handle? Where are the other business or where are the other factors in your business that you can concentrate on, such as the lead generation process, where you can generate more leads and in the long term make a lot more money? Okay, because a great closer who generates an additional, 50K per month in revenue while freeing up your time to grow the business is worth every penny you pay them. I promise you this. Okay. Another question that I can think of here that I you might be thinking there is, what if they leave and take all my clients, right? And this is only for specific businesses out there. And again, this is why you have, agreements such as your non-solicitation agreements when you sign with your closers, okay? And this is why you build systems, not dependencies on specific closer, okay? And again, like I talked about, the biggest risk is staying small because you're afraid to delegate tasks, right? That is so truth, right? Or truthful. Because once you get to a certain level where you're spending all of your time in that business, right? You are not going to get time to work on your business and grow that, your specific business, okay? Now, here's the truth that most founders will not admit. You are afraid that if someone else can sell as well as you, then maybe you're not as special as you thought. Okay, but here's what actually happens when you successfully remove yourself from the sales process. You become more valuable, not less, okay? And this is why, because you become a strategist, the visionary, the business builder. You become the CEO instead of a very, very expensive salesperson. Okay, now you might be thinking, well, this all makes sense, Craig, but where do I find somebody that's capable of representing my business at the highest level? Now, that's exactly the challenge that Sales Match solves for our specific problems, or our specific clients specifically. Now, most founders fail at this transition because they try to hire any and every salesperson and then hope to train them into their unique approach. But what if you could hire somebody who already understands the complex sales processes and can adapt quickly to your systemized approach? Okay, now the professionals in my network, right, the sales professionals in my network specifically have worked with founders before. They understand how to repeat somebody else's vision authentically, right? How to use founder created content and systems effectively, how to handle the authority questions that will ultimately come out without dragging the closer into the calls. And they also know how to maintain close rates while adapting to new processes, okay? So when you think of working with Sales Match, you're not just getting a closer, okay? You're getting somebody that can execute the scale framework immediately. Instead of spending months training somebody on the basics of high ticket sales, you can focus on transferring your specific advantages and systems. So if you're interested in having, Sales Match go out there, recruit, vet, and ramp your closer up to KPI, click the link somewhere down below, schedule a free consultation call. I hop into those calls now and again, so hopefully I can get to talk to you personally. But other than that, I really hope this video helped you get out of the sales process and start working on your business and not in your business. Thanks so much for watching and sticking through to this point, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye.